Welcome. This podcast is an exploration into being human and what's possible when there's less attention on the noise in our heads. Warning: while listening to this broadcast, you may experience moments of deep peace, sighs of relief, personal insights, or long stretches of dead air. Do not be afraid. This is normal. Under the Noise with Wyn Morgan and Kate Roberts.
Welcome. This is Under the Noise. I'm Kate Roberts.
And I'm Wyn Morgan.
So, Wyn, you had some ideas of what you wanted to talk about today.
Well, over the last couple of days, I've had a lot of coaching conversations with people in business, which is the vast majority of my work. And it has been for a long time. Coaching people one-to-one in their corporate setting and delivering training courses. So skills-based training, leadership training, negotiation, sales, and client management, and so forth. And I've been doing that for over 20 years now, which on one hand, I'm very pleased to be able to say, but on the other hand, it makes me feel like I am my age and I don't want to feel my age. But here's what I've been noticing more and more in working with people and seeing what's behind what makes anybody do what they do, when they do it well and when they do it less well. So another way of saying it would be that we can all relate to the regular day that we might have when we're doing anything, whether we are in an employed position, whether we're running a household, whether we're running our own business, where we would notice that our ability to do anything is variable. And the place that I really noticed this a lot was when I train presentation skills training. I might have 8 to 10 people in a room over 2 to 4 days. And in that time, they will practice delivering a presentation a number of times. And it's noticeable how varied their ability is. And it's not just linear that over time the practice will go up. There's bumps. And maybe their 5th out of 6 over a 3-day training course. That will be the best one. And the lack of it being linear has always intrigued me, because you'd think that when people are getting more practice and more skill and more understanding about how they come across, then there would be a smooth upward curve. But it's not like that. And I notice it for myself in me delivering training. There would be maybe a 20-minute session where things go really, really well, and I can feel it, and I'm feeling not on fire so much, but I'm feeling really connected with the group, and their listening is really high, and we're connected, and there's lots of insights happening. And then there are times where I'm totally in my head. And it's the same when someone's doing the 6 presentations and there's a bump, a dip in their level of performance. And it's been a wonderful learning for me to look deeper into the reasons why our performance is so variable, given the fact that our skills, knowledge, tools, all of those kind of things tend to be far more static than our performance level, hour by hour and day by day. And when I first noticed it, and I got really curious about it, I thought that what was happening that made the ups and downs happen in someone's performance was the external circumstances, such as, okay, there's a senior person who's come in from that company now, who's come to observe them, and that puts stress and pressure on them, and therefore they will dip. But it didn't take me long to notice that wasn't true either. Sometimes it looked like it was, but it really wasn't. It didn't stand up to scrutiny, because there would be some people would actually keep on doing well, doing great when the senior person was in the room. And even if there was the same person, the same senior person in the room, even the people who were affected by that person to varying degrees. So there's no way a static external influence can cause a variable internal response. It can't make sense that if, well, it's because of the senior person in the room, then everyone's performance would go down and it would stay there until you got used to it. But then there'll be a linear increase as well. But it was never that. So because every person would do this and it would be different for each person, this cannot be the cause of it. The external part of it can't be the cause, the senior person. And then it was kind of evident that it can't be anything from the outside that's causing the varying level of performance. So I researched quite a bit about this, and I read a lovely book called Where's Your Spotlight? And I must have read that at least 10 years ago, probably 16, 17 years ago now. And it was a very interesting book that said, wherever your attention is, that when it comes to presenting, delivering a group presentation, that will determine how well it goes. And that seemed to make sense. Another way of saying it would be, if the presenter, if it's me presenting and my attention is on the audience, it'll go better than if my attention is on me, Wyn, presenting. That seemed to be very clear, very obvious, and it hit the nail on the head. But I think there's a bit more to it than that. I think that that says a lot about everything, not just presenting. But it also comes back to the title of our podcast, Under the Noise. That whatever the noise is, especially if the noise is me thinking about me and you thinking about you, that will automatically reduce our ability to perform a task. So can I give an example? I remember vividly delivering a piece of training for an innovation team not far from London. And it was over 2 days, and I'd got to know that team quite well. And in the morning of, I think this must have been the day 2 of a 2-day training course with them, they had some sandwiches for breakfast. And one of the sandwiches that I particularly like, I like ketchup with it. So I put a little ketchup in it. And this is 15 minutes before I was then going to deliver the training. It's quite a big team. I think there were 3 of us delivering the training that day, and 2 business associates. And I'm there enjoying the second bite of my sandwich, and then the ketchup enjoyed the look of my shirt, and it dropped from the sandwich onto my shirt. Big splodge of ketchup onto my shirt. I was conscious of that ketchup stain the entire day. When I went to kind of clean up a little bit, but it was still kind of visible. But my focus was on that ketchup stain the entire day. So in the parts, the 3 or 4 parts of the training that I was delivering that day, I was awful, because all my thinking was about my ketchup stain, not about the people I was with, not about me connecting with them, not about me being impactful and helping them see some fresh ideas that would help them in their job, in their creativity and their ability to perform in their daily tasks. No, all my attention was on me. So where's the spotlight in that instance was the spotlight was on my ketchup stain. And that really dampened down my performance to a massive extent. Now, that's just an example, but that's an example of what we all do innocently and unconsciously to varying degrees all the time. And in my kind of curious quest to figure out what's the underlying thing that's behind the ups and downs in someone's performance at work, it's kind of, think I've been able to realize and bring it down to the whole thing about how much of my attention is on me. And another way of saying it would be how much of my attention is on the noise in my head, as opposed to letting noise do noise things, because it will, and then drop to a place where even if I'm noisy on the surface, I can see that for what it is, and then my attention's no longer on it. Because I didn't have to pay attention to my ketchup stain or the ketchup stain that was in my head, because believe me, I think no one else really cared nor noticed 90% of the time that I was talking, but I did. Anyway, so that would be my starter for 10, what I've noticed about performance at work.
You know, the question that showed up for me while you were talking was wondering, how does it feel different? So for like someone listening to the podcast, what does it feel like when you're up here as opposed to just a little bit under all that noise and then kind of working from that space? How does it feel different?
In my mind, one is barely noticeable. I wouldn't even know what I was feeling because my attention is not on how I'm feeling. But the other one feels, as you were saying it, I had visions of me being in various things that I do with just a lot of noise that feels like my head is throbbing full of stuff. An example that happened about, well, a week ago here in my office, where I was trying to do a piece of admin for a new client that their legal and financial teams, their finance teams needed from me to be able to work with them. And it just felt very confusing what I was doing. And I had my smart speaker playing music. And as I was trying to figure out what to do with these terms and what they were asking for, I just noticed that I could not see straight, think straight, hear straight. So I went to my smart speaker and I told it to stop. But in that instance, I stopped too, sort of overheating inside. I stopped putting my foot on the gas of my own internal noise. And I just slowed down. And then I felt the ease of slowing down as opposed to the feeling of being tight, being a little bit hot in my head because there was so much going on. And tight. The other thing that comes to mind is I notice that I get tight in my stomach and tight in my shoulders and my neck. I'm really aware of it now as you ask me that question. That's what happens when I'm engaging with noise. Because I'd imagine that you'd relate to what I've been talking about as well. So when you're engaged in the noise compared to engaging and or letting that go, how does it feel different for you?
One thing that I notice when I'm not focused on me is there's very little decision making going on. So whatever I'm doing, it's just the thing I'm doing. I'm not deciding to do anything. I'm not thinking about what will happen in the future or what's just happened. So when I drop down out of that space where it's all happening up here, there's almost like an action, but it's almost minus any decision making. It's just this is what I'm doing, and it's a flow. And so in addition to noticing that I'm not really making any decisions in that space, it just feels slower, less sped up. So in my mind, I describe it in terms of speed. And oftentimes when it is slower, it's not that there isn't something happening or that I'm not in action and things aren't moving quickly. It's that it feels slower paced, even if I'm doing the exact same amount of action. And within that, when it slows down, I notice that I'm more aware of things that are happening around me from that slower space. So I can remember specifically a time, even when I was teaching. So I was teaching high schoolers for a while. And, you know, you have 30 people in your room and they're all coming in with their own stuff, right? And so as you're trying to start the class, I remember specifically, it was the first day of the class. So all of the students are coming in and I'm about to get ready. And, you know, there's, of course, as a teacher, there's probably 20 things at the very start of a class to do before you even get to teach. And I remember specifically kind of taking a moment just to watch everyone come in. I don't typically do that. I'm usually like hustling but as I'm watching them, I look down, and this was years ago, but I look down and I notice that one of the students is holding his leg. And I don't know if I would have noticed that had I not taken a second to slow down just a bit and just notice them coming in and where they're coming from. And I asked him about the leg, and he said that he had accidentally cut himself that morning, and he didn't want to go to the nurse. But I was like, let's go check it out. And this is all happening as people are coming in. So I was like, I'd love for the nurse to, you know, to check that out. And it turned out that got like 25 stitches in his leg that day. And yeah, so I remember thinking afterwards, you know, maybe somebody else would have noticed and said something and asked him to go to the nurse, but had I not slowed down maybe just for a second, just to notice. Yeah. And I think that especially at work, maybe not necessarily that dramatic typically, but there are a lot of things to notice that we don't, or thoughts that come through that we don't, or new ideas that don't have a lot of space to show up for us. And if they do, then maybe we don't notice if our focus is up here and on us. So
you know, the question that I might have listening to what you and I have shared is, well, how do I quieten down the voice in my head then? How do I slow down? How do I get those thoughts out of my head? What do I do to not engage with them? And and it's a really good question. And here's, even though it sounds like a really good question, it's in the wrong direction, because how do I would be doing more, would be adding to the noise, as opposed to seeing the noise for what it is. And I've got a quick, I think, quite a quick but profound example that I remember from, well, I don't know how many months ago. It's less than 18 months ago. And in the days when we'd be flying all over the world to do stuff, right? And I was in Australia with work. And I was just about to leave the hotel room to work with a new group that morning. But I was feeling, I was noisy. I was noisy in my head. There was a lot of stuff in there. And the stuff looked quite real. The stuff really did look real to me. A lot of, not particularly brilliant self-talk, but it wasn't so much what it was saying, that there was so much of it. I was so loud in my head. And the time came for me to go to get ready and then to leave my hotel room for the 5-minute walk to go to the client's office and then run the training. Well, as I was collecting my bag of stuff and then getting everything ready before opening the door to leave the hotel room, I really felt the noise. And the noise looked really real. And then I had another thought, and the other thought was, when you know about noise. I opened the door and I left. So another way of saying it would be, you don't have to do anything with a noise other than notice it, because the noise will quieten itself down when we're not engaging, when we're not actively and innocently doing more with the noise in our head. All of a sudden, we go back to underneath the noise, and then we can notice what you've been describing. And we're then far more free psychologically and physically to actually do what's on our plate. For you to be a very attentive, caring teacher who was going to be a very good as well in teaching the class that day. And I was able to be then present and ready with that group in Australia, even though 5 before, 5 seconds before I opened the door, I felt like I wasn't capable of doing the job. Nothing had to change in the noise. It was just seeing the noise for what it is, and the understanding of noise, the nature of noise in our head, is enough for us to notice that that does not require attention.
So there's nothing to really do. Which is really different from, I think, what most people hear. All the steps to a quiet mind, or, some kind of action-oriented way for mindfulness to show up. Like a meditation practice and all the other things that are out there for people to be more productive, more creative, more present. So it's very different, the conversation that we're having when we talk about there being nothing to really do except notice.
And the one point to highlight that in what you just said, what do I do to be more present? Well, doing more is what takes us away from being present. Doing more up here is what takes us away from being now. Doing more in our heads. So therefore, that can't be the answer. It takes us further away. So literally, it is seeing what's happening, and in our level of understanding what's going on, it's possible for us to then say, I know about noise. I don't have to engage in it. And the mind quietens down on its own accord. And before we know it, back on the upswing. The upswing of doing whatever it is, we're back in the flow that you mentioned. And doing something well that when we're engaging with the noise in our heads, it's very difficult to.
Thanks, Wyn.
Thank you, Kate. So you've been listening to Kate Robertson, Wyn Morgan, Under the Noise, and if there's anything that you'd like to share about what you've heard or questions you might have about today's episode, then please get in touch. And we'll see you or hear you again very soon. Take care.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have a topic or question that you'd like us to chat about, email Wyn or Kate at wyn@winning.co.uk and kate@katerobertscoaching.com. Until then, enjoy what's possible under the noise.